Hi guys, sorry about the edit, but now we're going to get into the wrapping methods. And the wrapping methods, although similar to append, append2, prepend, prepend2, are a little bit different. They're related in the way that they still take either new elements that you make or existing elements on the page and kind of alter the document structure depending on kind of what you do with those. But where append, prepend, append to, prepend to, those deal more with kind of sibling and dependent type relationships. And what do I mean by that? Well, I mean, if we're appending something, so let's say, for example, in this H1, like we did at first, I'll just go ahead and just do this again so it makes it a little clearer. So we'll uncomment that. So here we've appended something, and that drops it in, and it's now a sibling of the existing content, and it's a child of the element that we appended it to. So basically, it's just this sibling and child relationship that those kind of deal with. When we get into the wrapping methods, we're more dealing with ancestor descendant type relationships. So, for example, we'll go ahead and use this first one here. And this is going to take all of the H1 elements and is going to wrap them in this P tag with the class of wrapped. And so, again, basically like ancestor descendant relationship. And it's going to take every H1 element and make that a descendant of this new parent, which is this P tag. So we'll uncomment that. And there you go. There's this whole lot of purple going on. But this P tag with the class of wrapped, I have given this color dark purple. And so you can clearly see now it's taken each one of these H1 tags and it's wrapped in that P tag now. So again, it's a descendant parent relationship that these all deal with. So what if we take elements that are existing on the page? So if you remember before, some of these we would, in the arguments, we would use another jQuery function. And we're going to go ahead and do that on this first one. So what that does, we're going to select each H1 element. We're going to say wrap, and we're going to wrap it in what jQuery selects for the H2 elements. Now, it won't wrap it in every single H2 element. Like, we have two of them here, and that would be kind of, I mean, you can't really do that. You can't just wrap it into elements unless one wrapped around the other. But that's not what's going to happen here. What it's going to do is it's just going to take the first H2 element that it finds, and then it's just going to use that to wrap all of these. So if we have multiple in a list, it doesn't even bother with these other ones. So we'll uncomment that and see what that looks like. All right. So we have our H2 second child of second level, right? And this is our H2 number one. That was the first H2 element. Wraps it, wraps it, wraps it. And then you'll notice these actually aren't taken out of the document flow the way in like append and prepend. It kind of pops them out of there. This leaves them put, but it just takes kind of a copy of all those and wraps it around these. Well, that's basically what you would expect to happen. But let's look at what happens when, instead of using this jQuery function, another thing we can use in the argument is just a selector string. So the same way that we use a selector string within the jQuery function to select certain things, we can use a selector string in the wrap method and these other methods as well. We just haven't looked at it yet. Now, you might expect that that's going to do the exact same thing. as the last example, right? It's going to take all the H1 elements, it is going to wrap them in H2. Let's uncomment that and see exactly what happens. Okay, all looks normal there on this first, right? That's the first H2 element. It's wrapped here. Let's scroll down. What? What is happening there? So things are pretty crazy. So you look at this one wrapped in the H2 level 1, second child is second level. That seems normal. But now this has this H1 number 1 tag in it also. That's super weird. You go down here, same thing down here. It's got this H1 number 1 tag in it. Why is that happening? And it's because jQuery has loops kind of built into it, right? So when you're selecting all of these H1 tags and then doing something to them, it is internally, it's looping through these. So it kind of spits out this first H1 tag, says wrap it in H2, and then it spits out the next H1 tag, says wrap it in an H2. If this were being done through vanilla JavaScript, you might see like a for loop used and all that. This is why jQuery is awesome and makes things really simple. It takes care of all that looping itself. But so what's happening here is it's basically going, okay, take this first H1 element, wrap it in the first H2 that you find. I'm gonna comment this out again really quickly. So saying, take this first H1 element, wrap it in the first H2 element you find. And it says, cool. Well, here's the first H2 element that I find. And it wraps this first H1 in that H2. Then it kind of goes to the next click through on the loop to now select this second H1 tag. And it does the same thing. It says, take this H1 tag, wrap it in the first H2 element that you find. Well, now this first H1 element has been wrapped in an H2 tag. So the first H2 tag that it finds is now this whole thing. So it's the H2, and I'll uncomment this one more time. It's this H2 that also now contains this H1. So it's now going to wrap this next H1 in this entire thing. And then we see the same thing on this third one, because once again, when it says now take this last H1 element and wrap it in the first H2 that you find, well, the first H2 that it finds is still this one. So that's why it looks exactly the same as this middle one. But pretty cool how you can see how that works. But then why does this one not do the same thing? Well, instead of every time here it going and getting a new H2 element, like searching for the first one on the page, this thing starts its loop here. This jQuery function starts its loop. It says wrap, and then this jQuery function runs to find all of the H2 elements. So this completes its entire loop before this thing clicks forward again to select the next H1 element. And then it just uses the first H2 element that it got from that loop. So even though it has all three, it goes, I can't use all three, I'll just use one. But again, that doesn't change because this whole loop completes before this goes forward. So the first H2 element will always be this one in that case. Pretty cool.